In this next video, we're going to combine several strategies and build a watch case seen here. The goal is to make this form both quickly and accurately, but also work smart so we can always go back and make changes. Changes are the key to design exploration. Let's start off with strategy number one, which is analyze the shape. So we're going to look at various profiles. We can see the side view here. Here's a profile around the back. From the front face, we can see there's some concentric circles, so that really helps. You can also look at the other ortho view, the top, which is not as helpful. So most forms will be best described from two different ortho or the 90-degree views. If you still have trouble analyzing the shape, always feel free to draw a sketch, either those ortho views or in perspective. That can really help get you going. Okay, I'm going to zoom out here down to the bottom. The second strategy we're going to be using is build with curves, and that is probably the most important strategy of all. We are also going to make sure not to draw stuff too complicated. If you can make 2 or 3 simple parts and combine, that's the way to do it. Also included in this strategy would be leveraging existing geometry. So I have got a square or rectangle there. We've got the circle already drawn, but since this is symmetrical, I can just mirror this to the other side. Go to Transform, Mirror. Notice I have the shape already selected, so right now I'm picking the plane. You do have to be careful if you want to keep the stuff clean and symmetrical. So I've got several of my O-snaps on down here, and I've got these red axis lines. So let's make sure we snap exactly where we think. A lot of times I see students making mistakes. They click too fast, and it may be off by just a slight amount, a degree or two. And that can cause problems later on. So let's make sure we snap exactly where we want to. Now we've got the basic outlines of these 3 shapes. Let's go ahead and combine them. The best way to do that is with a curve Boolean operation. So I'm just going to pick all 3 of these guys, 1, 2 with the shift, third one. So we get those into the set. We're going to find the command under the curve menu, curve edit tools, and there is curve Boolean. Let's select that. Now some of these options need to be scanned pretty quickly. We always want to combine regions. That's why we're doing it. The delete input, though, I like to switch and get rid of all the input curves. I only want the final result. Another really cool trick here is a lot of times people will click on these internal zones, but your goal is to really define the path as fast as possible. So that means I'm going to click on the outside, and you'll notice it's zipped around. It's going to ignore the internal stuff, and if I right-click to accept, that was definitely the quickest and easiest way to do that. Okay, when possible, I do try to put fillets on the curves before I go into the surfaces. Let's do that now. This fillet command is so common. It's over here on the main toolbar. So I'm going to fillet curves. I'm going to modify these numbers to radius equals 15. And I'm going to be careful here. I don't want to put 15 on the inside because that would disappear almost back to the corner. I'm just going to do these larger or more obtuse angles here. You can also right-click to repeat the last command. That's really handy when you're doing repetitive stuff. So I'm just moving around, right-clicking. It's going straight back to that fillet. It's leaving the same radius in there. Now I want to change that radius. So I'm going to right-click, and before I do the next operation, I can just click on the radius. This time I'm going to use a much smaller number. I think 3 will work good. So we're going to click on those 2 intersections, and the same process. Just zoom around, right-click to repeat. Also, you might notice I'm in perspective as much as possible. That really helps me pick exactly what I want. Some of the ortho views will have geometry stacked up, and you can pick the wrong stuff and just have to start all over. Okay, there's all the pre-filletizing done. Okay, the next group of strategies are actually going to talk about together. Those would be 3, 4, and 5 on our list. We're going to be trying to make simple surfaces and then combine them into more complicated surfaces. Also, when it makes sense, we're going to build stuff bigger and then trim it back. And finally, strategy number 5 is leverage existing geometry. We don't have to make new stuff if we can just copy something, mirror something, etc. Let's go ahead and create a surface from this arc. This is the profile matching that rounded shape on the bottom of the watch. So we'll just make a quick extrusion via the surface, extrude curve straight. A lot of times this defaults to just one direction. So since I'm working on the origin, I definitely want to say both sides and make it bigger. Make sure you go well past. Now we're going to trim this back using this curve we just created. Now you may think we need to either project this curve onto the surface or do some sort of extrusion. However, most of the time, if you have simple curves and surfaces, Rhino can find the intersection by using this construction plane and kind of doing an implied projection. Let's try that out. I'm going to go to Trim. Cutting objects will be the curve. Right-click, and then make sure you click on the outside. Nowhere here, that'll just make a hole, but click on the outside so Rhino can find that. There you go. So that is the quickest way to make a trim without having to do additional extra steps. Always give that a shot. Now I'd like to take this surface, which is the bottom, and recreate the top, which can be done easily with a simple surface offset. But we're going to look at some of the options along the way because there are quite a few. Let's go to the surface menu. Here is the offset command. Before I go any further, I am going to select a distance, but I'm not going to type in a number. I've got this construction line over here, so I'm just going to snap on those two endpoints, and that should input a very specific value. You can see it just changed from the prior value of 6 to 16.85. The next couple of steps are just as important. We're going to flip those arrows so it goes the direction I want, and probably most importantly, solid equals yes. If we don't do that, you just get two planes. We want these two surfaces and the edges in between. So it looks like everything is set. Right-click to execute. And there is the thickness. You can see it does get a little more complicated, but that was very efficiently created. Okay, we do have an extra shape here waiting to be constructed. This is the watch face. We've got a curve already made. Notice how it goes inside and overlaps. That's another important factor here, is building things bigger or creating these overlaps whenever possible. Let's just do a simple revolve and get that out of the way. Surface, revolve. Again, I'm being careful where I snap, so I'm going to pick that intersection or endpoint, and then use the axis lines or anything you've created in the scene to make sure it's not off axis or kind of a little mistake can creep in very easily if you're not careful. Now we can start from any angle and end at any angle. I'm just going to skip that and say, give me a full circle. So there is the watch face. So as we wrap this up, we're going to talk about strategy 6, which is filleting. This can be very challenging for many beginners. So the key to this is just stay organized and try to do it whenever possible in 2 passes. That's especially important when you have situations like this. We've got 3 corners meeting. So that can be problematic, especially on complicated surfaces. Okay, so the question becomes, what is the big fillet? What is the small fillet? I like to first ask the question backwards. Where would the small fillet be? And that's usually pretty obvious. That's going to be this top edge here and the bottom edge. So when it crosses another fillet, that should already be done, meaning that's the big one. So that can really help you get unstuck from this fillet confusion. Let's go ahead and start the solid fillet edge command. I'm going to modify the radius from the default of 1 to 7. The nice thing about the solid fillet is we can pick all the edges in the whole file and just keep moving around. Again, I'm in perspective for this exact reason. So I'm going to pick all those edges. Make sure you get the right one. If you pick the wrong one, you can just say none. And that's why I like to zoom in to make sure I get the right one. Okay, then I always like to zoom out and just make sure that I got every one selected. Otherwise, I might have to do it again, or it could cause a problem. Let's right-click to accept. We get a couple preview steps here. And there is our large fillet. Let's repeat the fillet command. We can also do that just by going up here. And here's all the most recent commands. We'll just pick fillet edge there. I do want to modify the next second round of fillets, which needs to be smaller. Remember, big fillets first, smaller fillets, which would be 7 or smaller. 2 is a lot smaller. Let's do that. A really cool feature here is the chain edges. So this would be a lot of broken edges here. Instead, by chaining them, it wraps around and makes a little racetrack loop. So that is ready to go. Let's do a little preview here. A couple of exception steps, and we're done. This time I'm not going to do the chain edges, and I'll show you how you can actually do it at any time. So I'm going to right-click to repeat, and I'll just start picking an edge. And now you'll notice it doesn't go all the way around. You can always keep adding and clicking. However, that can get quite tedious, like in this situation. So I'll just click on chain edges, and we can start it at any time. So right-click to repeat, a couple previews, and let's right-click to repeat to wrap this up. Chain edges. I'm going to go very fast here at the very end. It's all the same stuff since it's symmetrical. Right-click, chain edges. So this entire form was made with a simple but very smart sequence of steps. But did you happen to catch how many curves were used? Not counting the copies and offsets, there were only 5 curves. Amazing! The point of this exercise is not to make 3D forms faster, because that says nothing about quality. The goal is to let us back up at any time and recreate a variety of design explorations. That's the real key to quality: iteration and refinement.